right, welcome back to Paranormally Correct. I am your host, Sarah, and with me is my co-host,
Rebecca.
And we are going to have a great show tonight, guys. This is going to be excellent. Joining us is John, and John has a pretty intense story to tell about some encounters he's had with Dogman. So, John, welcome to the show.
Hi there. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we get started, I want to remind everybody to click the like button and click subscribe and turn on post notifications so that you never, ever miss a cool live stream like this one ever again. So, John, take us back to, I know you said you had a lot of paranormal experiences in your youth. So I kind of want to take a minute and talk about those because that's my area of expertise. And I know Rebecca, she's a ghost hunter too. So kind of take us back and tell us a little bit about that.
Okay. So where I'm growing up at, I grew up on a homestead. Family's owned it for over 150 years. The house my father built, except for the area where the bedrooms are in, used to be an apartment building that was brought out from Arlington, Texas. He had it moved out here and just added on to it. Anyway, growing up, stuff would be moved around, everything else. You'd set something down, come back, and it wasn't there. Or if we kept the pool table set up, middle of the night, you'd hear the pool balls bouncing around, moving around, and you'd find them all in the pockets in the morning. Even so much as far as the game systems, like actual game consoles, the PlayStation 1, where you actually have to click the button to turn it on, would turn on and start playing. And I'd have everything from waking up and seeing a shadow standing in the doorway, to having books thrown at me or other objects thrown at me. It got to the point where I just throw them back. Kind of one of those, most of the time, whenever it was doing something like that, it was trying to wake me up for some reason.
Mm-hmm.
One of the times, the worst time that it did anything, I was dragged out of bed by my ankle. And I'm sitting on the floor, trying to wake up, figuring out what in the hell just happened. Whenever my dad opens the door and say, "Hey, we got a fire, let's get it out." So
basically, this thing was kind of looking out for you by doing this, which I think is like pretty amazing. So what did you think when the paranormal activity first started? Were you familiar with ghosts at that point in time, or did anyone in your family have paranormal experiences that you could kind of relate this to, or what did you think it was initially?
So my grandmother would have some of them. She said a couple of times in her house, which is on the same property, that she would look up and there would be a shadow standing in the doorway. A lot of it had kind of started after I'd gotten a piece of furniture from her that was my great uncle's. And so we kind of figured that it might have been him that was looking out for me, because the shadow, the build, everything that I could see, as far as the definitions I could see, was the same build that he had. And I'd never met him. I just knew him from pictures. The temperament of it and a lot of the stuff that it would do from the stories that my father would tell of him, was very similar. I was having activity as young as I can remember.
What would you say would be your, keeping with the paranormal line of thinking here, what would you say would be the most intense thing that you witnessed, whether it touched you spiritually or if it scared you, or it just stood out as something?
Getting dragged out of bed would probably be that one.
Yeah, that would for me too, I think. That would
be
a bad wake up.
It basically saved his life. I mean, that's pretty crazy.
But yeah, we were able to get the fire put out, and of course all the neighbors and everything ended up showing up and helping put out. And it was the crazy thing, living in the country, it was caused by a snake that climbed up and crossed on the transformer on the power pole outside. So, but we were able to get it taken care of and got it out. My father and I were on another piece of property working on it in West Texas, and my mother calls me asking if I had my PlayStation set on a timer. I had to explain to my mother that there is no way to put that on a timer. You actually have to press the button down physically to turn it on, because apparently it was on and a game was playing.
Do you think that when it did that, it was probably like picking something that it knew that you spent a lot of time with and paid a lot of attention to, and it knew that it would get your attention pretty well if it turned on the console?
Probably.
Yeah.
But at the same time, whenever I was little, I can remember seeing two smaller shadows, or you'd catch something out of the corner of your eye. It looked like two kids. So it could have been them that was playing with it. That's who I figured was messing with pool balls.
Yeah. So over the years, how did this activity evolve? And like, I know you said that there were a couple of, really big events later on that were kind of supernatural, paranormal. So tell us a little bit about that.
Oh, okay. So it kind of moved on. My wife moved into the house with us, and not even 2 days after moving in, she had brushed her hair, set the brush down on the bed, went to go use the restroom, came back, the brush was missing. It shows up 3 months later at the exact same spot she had left it. So little things like that would go around. We had a dry sink that was in my father's bedroom, and just one of the old dry sinks that were supposedly was brought over by some of my ancestors. I'm not 100% on that. That's just what I was told. There was a handprint on that particular mirror on it that you don't clean it off, period. You don't mess with it. One of my dad's girlfriends decided to clean it, and she couldn't find any of her stuff forever.
Oh, wow. Yeah, so she didn't know that was like kind of a thing to leave, like a family thing, like leave it there, leave it alone. Yeah, wow.
She tried to clean it off, and I mean, it came right back that night.
Oh, really?
So,
wow.
Yeah, like I said, she spent an hour trying to scrub it off of there, and it came right back. And we're talking about a mirror from the 1800s.
I noticed from listening to Sarah's interview, phone call with you, that you had a lot of things that tilted me toward possible fae activity.
Oh, entirely possible.
What is your family bloodline? Do they come from
Ireland?
That would explain a bunch.
Yeah, it would.
Especially since you've had the land, your family's had the land over the last 150 years. 150 years ago, they would have been full believers and that sort of thing.
So my family came from Ireland and Wales, and both of those areas were also the areas that they came from over there were settled by the Vikings during the sieges. So I know for certain by tracing my lineage back that we go back to there. Past that point, it's kind of hard to trace it. But yes, definitely that. And the land around here was very rich in Comanche as well. It was a good area for the Comanches to be ambushing the travelers on the Chisholm Trail. And so there's been a lot of death here over the years. I've found several grave sites down in the woods along the creek line, obviously unmarked, but they're obvious grave sites, and old wagon wheels and stuff like that were in the creek. So there's a lot of history in this area. Great-grandfather watched the Comanche burying their dead on a hill that's about 1,000 yards from here.
So now you had a really interesting story. Well, you had a lot of interesting, parts to your story here, but there's two in particular that are coming to mind, and I wonder if they fit into the timeline here where we're at this point in the story. I especially love the one with the thermal camera. When did that happen? Was that before or after the tree? Because whichever one came first, we'll do that one first. Because
that one was last year. The tree was probably 25 years ago.
So tell us, let's start with the tree then. Tell us the story of the tree, because this is very unique and unusual.
So being younger, even back then, anytime I was walking around or going to the woods or anything like that, I had a 12 years old and I had my first, mainly because I'd go down in there. I mean, it saved me several times because I've run into coyotes, I've run into mountain lions and everything else. And so we used to go down in there and we'd go hunting. Some friends and I would come out, or friends would come out, and we would go hiking through the woods and explore and everything else. And we never wanted to be down there after dark. It just always felt like something was watching you, period. Always. And you could go through a thicket in there, or you could go around the creek line and drop off of a cliff and then cross the creek and come up into a little clearing, and there was a tree there. This tree, the canopy of it would touch the ground, and it was the only thing in this little clearing. The tree was what we call a bodark. They're hardwood. They live forever. They used to be used a lot for making bows and stuff like that. The Indians used to think that there was something. They almost are similar to a yew tree, kind of in that sense. But the canopy hung all the way to the ground. And then there was basically one little spot that a person, like, it looked like animals would run in and out of it. So it was maybe an opening about 3 foot tall and 2 foot wide. And for a bodark to be this size, it would have had to have been well over 100 years old. Curiosity got to me, and I was the only one brave enough or stupid enough to crawl through it. My buddy stayed outside, and I crawled through, and the air just felt thick, like almost like you were trying to swim through water, thick. It was real heavy. It just felt different under there. And then shortly after I got underneath it, it sounded like 100 voices going through my head at once, just coming from every which direction, all around me, everywhere else. The coloration seemed to change just a little bit. It turned more of a yellowish color underneath there. Instead of like the clear sunlight, what light was coming in, there was more of a yellowish hue. I explored around underneath there, and you'd find little bones and stuff like that from animals that had gotten under there. And like I said, the air was different, and so the sound was a little bit different underneath there. You couldn't hear anything outside. There's no bug sound. There's no birds or anything else of the woods. I explored it around. I found some markings that were on the tree that looked like they had been carved into the tree. I didn't understand what they were, didn't know what they were. Later on, after trying to look them up and doing as much research on it as I could, because of course at that time the internet was not really much of a thing. So I was having to go through books and everything else, and try finding a book on anything like that in a remote town in Texas. Ain't gonna happen very good. We're kind of in the Bible Belt. They don't want to believe in that stuff.
Yeah.
I did find out what it was. It was considered to be runes.
Mm-hmm.
They were very similar to, I guess, more so of the medieval style, not the Viking style. but there were still sigils. There were markings.
Mm-hmm.
Something that would have been tied to either occult or witchcraft, something along those lines. Or even, like I said, it could have been just the way they were carved, but they might have been in the Viking style. It's hard to remember. But I do know that that's what they wore, and that was the closest thing I could find in history books. How that would be on a tree in the middle of Texas, I don't know. Don't have a clue.
Yeah, exactly. That's super weird.
It does not make any sense to me at all on that.
You know, we actually have we have a lot of caves in Kentucky, and people have found the exact same thing inside of caves here in Kentucky. Like runes, like full-on runes, and then also like some other strange markings and things like that. Have you ever, by any chance, gone back to this tree, or maybe tried to like see? Did you ever get any pictures, or were the markings still there?
I never went back under it.
Oh, okay. You ever tempted to go? Because I would totally go, and I would get pictures.
I would too.
Well, like I said, it was one of those things, and the main reason why I wouldn't go back under it is whenever I finally did decide to leave, because I wanted to stay under there, and I wanted to stay under there. It's hard to explain, but at the same time, my skin started burning, and whenever I got out of there, was basically blood trickling down my arms and my legs and pretty much all over my body, like I'd rolled around in a barbed wire fence. I thought I was in there for maybe 5 to 10 minutes, maybe. And apparently, according to my friends, who I thought were lying at the time, they swore up and down that I was in there for at least 45 minutes and that they had been yelling for me for the past 15 minutes.
Wow. That's crazy. So you kind of lost time, like as with the UFOs and abduction and stuff, where people talk about lost time. You kind of had something like that happen.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, that's the only way you could say it. But I figured they were just pulling my leg. Yeah.
I mean, I would too, because I've actually experienced lost time myself, and it never feels like lost time, and it's like, kind of unbelievable, and it messes with your mind in such a way that it's hard to explain or understand. So you kind of, it sounds like you had definitely some type of supernatural almost experience in there.
Quite possibly, yes. Even before that, I always drew a marking on just about everything I owned. I never knew what that marking was. I had found out whenever I started doing all the research on those marks, because it looked very similar to those. And the marking was a bind rune, plain and simple. And the runes that were in it, the best explanation I could come with was order under chaos. So that's essentially what it would mean, is that order under chaos. And what's rather interesting on that is that I do best in chaotic situations.
So it was almost kind of like a message meant specifically for you.
Yeah. So, and I've always done really good under chaotic situations, any kind of emergency situation, fight, anything like that, even whenever I was in the military. Something turns off and something else turns on.
Right.
I go on autopilot, and that's it.
What did you do in the military?
Construction battalion, Navy.
Okay.
I was a crazy one running a bulldozer, getting at.
You've got to go back to that tree, and then you've got to let us know if the markings are still in there, or I've got to come see this tree, because that sounds pretty amazing.
For sure. Come to Texas, Sarah.
Unfortunately, I no longer have permission to be on that property. It was sold.
Yeah. I know you mentioned that there's some stuff going on there, and that comes up a little later in the story in a pretty interesting way. I would sneak in. I'd be like, look, guys, I need to see this tree. Nothing's keeping me.
I'm curious if it's still there. I'm really curious if it's still there, because the tree that's on my property, that's kind of almost the same way, that we used to always see little lights buzzing around, which makes me laugh because of her saying the fae stuff. We always called it the fairy tree. Mm-hmm. And because there would be little lights buzzing around it. Now, unfortunately, it's half dead.
Yeah.
and I don't know why. I don't know if it's going to come back or not, but it's half dead.
That would be a real shame if the rune tree was gone.
It would be a shame.
And there's no telling what would happen if it was still good and a development company decided to remove it.
Yeah.
There'd probably be no good of that.
Yeah, exactly. So now getting back to the paranormal stuff, I believe we were around maybe the teenage years, maybe moving into, did we get to that? Okay. Let's talk a little more about the paranormal stuff. So I know you have another really amazing story, the one that I like so much about the thermal camera. So let's.
So that was actually last year. I was, at the time, there was a manhunt around the area, and there was a $5,000 bounty on his head because he was a police officer, and he was still at large. They didn't know where he was. I was in a close enough area that he very well could be on me or could have been hiding, even though I'd gone and cleared all the buildings, checked them all, basically sweep the whole property to make sure that it was clear, and didn't find him. But we had a big issue with wild hogs, and they were tearing up one of our fields behind the shop here. So I put a ladder on the shop. I climb up on the shop. I have my on it, and I have a thermal spotting scope. I'm sitting up there. I use the scope. I look around. I don't see anything except for a couple of rabbits, and the horses are coming up to where I'm at. They're over there next to me, so pigs generally make a lot of noise. So I just planned on kind of laying back, watching the stars, and waiting until I'd hear something. And so I was halfway dozing off on top of the roof. And the horses started snorting and stomping and making noise. So I look at them, and they're staring off towards that field. I'm like, okay, maybe the pigs are coming in from the trees. All right. I roll over, pull up the thermal. I start looking across the direction. I see a deer. The deer's acting funny. It's watching something. Okay. I keep going, and then I see a person. The person is walking right across my field. And generally, if you've used thermal, you'll know that where their clothing is and anything else that can insulate it, especially whenever the ambient temperature is about the same as a human body temperature, that it doesn't show just all that bright. So I wasn't quite noticing some things about it. I just thought it was, walking through tall grass or the clothing on it or anything like that, but it wasn't showing as bright as what a normal person would show. And so I looked through the night vision, couldn't see it. Could not see him. I was thinking I was about to collect $5,000. Could not see him. It's like, all right, what's going on? Did he see me move? Did he hear me? Did he duck down? What's going on? It's 200 yards, 200 to 250 yards away. So a decent distance for the night vision. And I get the thermal back. Now, still walking right across the field. So I'm like, okay, I'm just going to watch this a little while. And he's headed straight towards one of the barbed wire fences. I'm like, all right. He's going to walk straight into the barbed wire fence. This will at least be some entertainment, if nothing else. And it walks straight through the barbed wire fence, goes about another 30 yards, and then just fades out.
So what you were watching was basically a ghost.
Pretty much. That would be my assumption. At that point in time, I kind of looked at it and said, yeah, no, I've seen this movie before. I'm going to bed.
Exactly. Yeah, that would freak me out too. We always use thermal stuff on investigations, and there's nothing quite like seeing a figure on a thermal or, even just like a night vision camera and then not seeing it actually there. It's a trip for sure.
Oh, yeah. And then, of course, as you're climbing down the ladder, you go to turn around and you're like, it's going to be right behind me. Yeah, it's going to be right there. It wasn't, but it wouldn't be the first time I've had that issue where I've turned around and there's a shadow or something right there.
Yeah. So this is like, you've had so many crazy experiences leading up to this, and then it gets even wilder once we get into the Dogman stuff. Do you feel like there's any connection between the paranormal activity that is present in this area and what you're currently experiencing?
Maybe, very well might be, but it's hard to say. I mean, it's entirely possible that tree down there is some type of portal. Maybe a lot of the energy's coming from it. That, or it's just coming from the land.
Yeah, that's a good point. For some reason, I didn't even think about that initially. Like, what if the tree is like a portal or something? Like, you know,
It could very well be the place that an elemental calls home.
yeah, it could be that too.
Maybe. But that's something I haven't done a whole lot of research on. So
I would not go there. I would let it have its own life.
I would go there.
Well, I would go there briefly, but under the well, I would make myself known to this thing, let it know I'm not sticking around. I'm not going to hurt its property. I just want to look. I'd get in there, look, take pictures, whatever, and get out.
yeah.
Well, but now, as you've come to know recently, it may not be very safe to go out there poking around because you've got an unwanted guest on your property.
Several. I have at least 3.
At least 3 unwanted guests. That's even worse.
Yeah. So obviously that property sold. And whenever it sold, they started cleaning out all the abandoned barns and old houses and everything else that were on it. And the people that were leasing the property were no longer leasing it for hunting. So there was no feeders or anything like that, which means that all of the animals should have been coming to my feeder. And every year before that, I'd always see a group of, 8, 9 deer and 30, 40 hogs constantly. Well, last year, no. I saw 2 deer the whole season. Pigs, instead of 30 to 40, a sounder of 30 to 40, you might see 1 or 2 running around. And they're very, very skittish. Very skittish. So I didn't know what was going on. I was actually down there hunting one night, and it sounded like something big moving through the woods. I thought, oh, okay, well, maybe I'm actually going to get a decent-sized buck come out, or a decent-sized deer, or it could have been a cow. And all of a sudden, a whole pack of coyotes starts going off. It sounds like something woke up a den of coyotes. And this is still sunlight. I mean, probably a good 30 to 40 minutes, if not an hour before sunset. And the coyotes are going off like crazy. And I mean, they are screaming, they're howling, alerting, and everything else. And then it sounds like something grabs one of them. It lets out a blood-curdling cry and yelps and everything else. And it sounds like it's dragged away. And then they all kind of go quiet. And I'm like, okay, something's not right. And all right, so I kind of pack up. And I'm like, yeah, there's not going to be any deer coming in after that. Pack up, go to the house. A couple of nights later, I'm getting ready to go to work because at the time I was doing swing shifts all over the place. And that particular night, I was having to go in well after dark. So I let the dogs out. I was out there with them for a little bit. And then they all run past me and hit the door, wanting in. I'm like, okay, they're acting weird, They're whimpering, they're crying, they're trying to scratching at the door, trying to get back in. Okay, so I let them back in. And mind you, we're in a fenced-in area where they can't get loose. Everything's well lit. We have floodlights and everything else up. We bring them in the house. The bigger dog, he's sitting there staring out the window, whimpering. I'm like, okay, there must be coyotes or mountain lions, something out there. I grab I head out. I start looking around. I'm shining a flashlight around. I see eye shines. It's an amber eye. Okay. What is this? It's not the horse. What is this? It's low to the ground. All right. So I start walking towards it and keeping the flashlight on it. It doesn't run. Coyotes run. Mountain lions you usually leave. Sometimes they'll hang around until you get fairly close, and then they'll take off, especially whenever they know you're walking straight towards them. They're an ambush predator. They like it whenever you don't know they're there. I get 30 yards from it. At this point, I can see it very clearly in my flashlight. This is a dog. It's on all fours, crouched down, angled towards me. It's not fully facing me. It's not fully facing to the side. It was looking like it was trying to sneak up on a pen that we have one of our animals in. Well, out here we shoot predators, period. I mean, no ifs, ands, or buts about it. If it's something that looks like it will hurt our livestock, we do not hesitate. So I right in the chest, or the side, basically. You can see the impact. You can see it kind of sway from the impact. It turns fully face me, stands up on its hind legs. At this point, I cuss. Basically, just go F. And then my words are, well, Valhalla, here I come. Put 3 more into it. So I put 2 more into the chest. You can see the impact on each of those. The third, plain and simple. On that one, it shook its head, it kind of grabbed at its face, nose area, and kind of glared at me and turned and left. I didn't get the feeling that I'd run it off. I just kind of got the feeling that I was going to be more of a pain for it to go after me than it necessarily wanted. When it left and it got far enough away that I couldn't see it in the flashlight anymore, I eased over to where it was and looked. There was a little bit of blood there, but not enough. Not like there should have been by any means. So it definitely bleeds, but that should have done in just about any animal that should have been out here. I eased back up to the house, kind of watching all around me, circling as I go, just because, I'm half expecting this thing to circle around on me. And I head on into work. Nothing really else happens that night. A few nights later, I'm hunting again. I'm thinking that's just kind of a one-off situation. It's decided to leave me alone. It's not going to come back. That kind of thing. I'm hunting. I'm not hunting down at that other blind next to the woods. I'm hunting at one that's down by one of my ponds and across the pastures, which we'd always see deer in there because it follows the creek line and it's kind of brushy, but it's not real thick. I'm sitting in there. About the time my wife's coming home, she sends me a text and says, hey, there's something big and dark that she thought might have been deer that went past the backside of the house towards where I'm at. Okay. So I'm sitting here waiting for it to come out from where the pond is, which is fairly heavy brush. It does. It comes out and it's not moving like any cat I've seen. It's not moving like a deer. It's very weird. It moved quick. I actually recorded it because it was 200 yards away from me. I had was not scoped and it was action because my feeder was only 50 yards. There was no reason to have a that. So there was no use for me trying to at it at all. I figured all I would have done is pissed it off. And I watch it. It moves around a little bit. And I notice that its shoulders are pretty much at the top of the barbed wire fence where it's moving. So its shoulders are easily 4 to 5 foot. After it moves around for just a few minutes, maybe 2, 3 tops, it stops, turns, looks straight at me, and stands up. And I got it all recorded. Now, granted, again, trying to record this with an iPhone at 200 plus yards at dusk, it ain't that great a quality. There's no way to positive ID it at that distance. But you can clearly see it standing up.
So in that moment, and especially with the first sighting, you said that, you could tell immediately, right, that it was some type of dog-like creature. But what were you thinking? Were you thinking, like, is this just a stray dog, or is it a wolf, or like, did it instantly register to you that this was something completely different than the normal?
Yeah, I've dealt with other strange creatures out here, so it kind of instantly like, oh, yay, something else.
Right. And that's something that we forgot to talk about. And maybe you're referencing the goblins. Is that what
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know if they're goblins or what. To me, they look like critters that were about, and whenever I say critters, it was the movie back from the 80s. But instead of only being a foot tall, these were about 3 to 4 foot.
Now, were these at all related, you think, to the Dogman experiences that you're having now?
I don't think so. I don't know.
So, but you knew immediately that this was no average dog when you saw it. Yeah. And especially, what were you thinking when it stood up on 2 legs? Because that would have been the moment for me where I was shitting and getting,
Like I said, order under chaos.
There you go. That tree comes back into relevance.
It was just one of those things that, like I said, I said the F word, and then Valhalla, here I come.
Yeah.
Because it took a step towards me, and I took a step towards it. So it was just one of those things of, I wasn't going to back away. I wasn't going to run. If I was going to run, I was going to run towards it. Typically, with a lot of stuff, the more you can get into something's head, the worse off it's going to be. If you can throw it off of its game, off of what it's expecting, the better chance you have. Plain and simple. And that's kind of what I had done with those little creatures, goblins, whatever. I guess they could be a species of goblin that's just hairy. But it doesn't match up to much of anything. It could be what...
Keeping along with the Fae idea of things, it could be a leprechaun.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, in the true sense of they were little, short, nasty creatures that like to do magic.
For some reason, I kept hoping that maybe they were baby dog men. But I've only heard like one story about a baby dog man, and I'm always on the lookout for another one. But
would they be considered puppy men then?
Yeah.
A pup? I don't know.
Man pups?
I think I've got one out here, so I don't know. But no, these were not, because there was a group of probably about 10 of them at one point in time. And you would see them out of the corner of your eye. They'd be darting in and out. They did not like light whatsoever. And like I said, they were hairy or furry. And they didn't really have a snout that protruded out very far.
So not very dog-like at all, then.
No, not very dog-like. They're very goblin troll-like with just hairy.
Now, this is something that I mentioned to you the other day on our phone call that we had. There was a case a lot like that here in Kentucky. It was in Pikeville, Kentucky. And there's been cases throughout history because I'm also a ufologist. Like, ufology is my big thing. And so I'm, really fascinated by these obscure cases. And one of the types of creatures that most people don't know about is UltraTerrestrials, which is what I think you have, what your goblins were. The only difference being that the Pikeville case, the creatures were hairless, and that was one of the biggest defining features that the witness reported. However, I mean, hair or no hair, they sound pretty much like the same thing. And this person that reported this case, he had a mine shaft on his property. Mm-hmm. And that's where he believed that they were coming from. And they would come out at night, and kind of like what you said, they harassed his kids. They stole his kids' toys. They took wreaths off the door, all kinds of crazy stuff like that. But
these would leave dead animals basically on our doorsteps. They would
yeah,
throw dead animals at my window, tap at it. They'd clawed the screen several times. My father always thought I was tearing it up with a knife. And then one night I finally got tired of it. I was probably 13 years old. And my father used to always keep a Mini 14 downstairs for coyotes and everything else. And this thing was tapping at my window, woke me up at about 1 to 2 a.m. and then was just kind of beckoning me with its finger. So I finally get up and go, and this thing, just the glee and joy on its face. You could tell this thing was evil, but the glee and joy on its face that it thought it finally convinced me to come outside. It was almost jumping up and down with joy until it saw me come out with it. Then it took off running. I emptied 40 rounds into it. 40 shots. And granted, that's 40 shots at 223. Probably not all of them hit it, but a good majority of them did. It went down. My father comes running out, like, what the hell are you shitting at and everything else? And I said, whatever the hell woke me up. And he's like, bullshit. And I said, it just went down right there. So we grab a flashlight, we go down where it was. All that's there is just a pile of goo. Just a reddish brown goo that stinks like vomit. And that's it. I mean, it was a horrid smell, which these things stunk anyways. Every time they were around, you could smell them before you could see them. But he kind of looks at me, he goes, all right, we're not talking about this. And we go back up to the house, and that's it. After that, I never saw him again.
I guess they learned their lesson.
So
yeah. Yeah, it's crazy, the similarities in this encounter with these things and the Pikeville goblins. And then, there's been other times in Kentucky too that these ultra-terrestrials have popped up, and I truly feel like that's what you are experiencing. And there was something else I was going to mention about that. Yeah, the other thing is that one of the big similarities is how you said it kept trying to get you to come out into the yard, because that was something that the Pikeville witness reported, that they kept trying to lure his kids and his pets into the yard. Yeah. So it's like, what are the intentions? This thing was
constantly trying to do that. And like I said, I was 13 years old. So
yeah, very similar.
It just apparently was not expecting a 13-year-old to light it up.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good thing that, you took the initiative there, because there's no telling what would have happened to you if you hadn't. So getting back to the Dogman stuff. So we talked about your first experience with this thing. What was kind of the next thing that happened? Because, did the activity pick up? And I know that you have activity during the day as well as the night. So let's kind of talk about that a little bit, about what came next.
The next activity was basically, like I said, I saw it down there walking around. I decided to pack up while I still had a little bit of light, and I could see it at least crossing the field towards me, and I could at least empty what I had into it. And got packed up and left. And there's a few abandoned buildings and barns and a house that's down in that area that's over on the other property. So I figured it probably went over to those. I didn't see it. Later that night, my wife and I were heading out. We had to go to town, go pick up something. We were going to get dinner and everything else. And we were leaving, and I saw something across the road. Something didn't look right. So I slowed down, eased up. And again, this is the driveway that I just come in a couple of hours earlier. It was barbed wire. Barbed wire was dragged across the road right behind a cattle guard, just where if I did drive over, it would get wrapped up in my axle. So I stopped before it. I'm like, okay, something's not right. There's nothing over here that should have been able to drag that across there. The cows are not in this field at the moment. What's going on? Because, a cow will get hung up in it and drag it across. I've seen that. Well, the cows weren't over there in that field. They hadn't been in a month. Okay. My wife has an uneasy feeling, so she grabs her. Whenever I get out of the vehicle, I already have my pistol drawn and ready. I'm shining the flashlight around, checking things out. And as I'm moving it, she just has a feeling to take a picture. So she takes a picture, and we start looking through the pictures. And what do you know? There's 2 pointy ears, a snout, and the shape of a dog hiding behind some pipes. And the pipes are a 12-inch pig, so pressurized gas. We get the picture, and we see that in the picture. And nothing really happens. I get back in the truck. We drive off, continue on. That was in December. Make it through holidays. Then we have 5 horses that are loose in the pasture. One of them is blind in one eye. She does fine out there with others. It starts to sleet and snow up here in February. That day I came in, and she was fine. Checked them all whenever I came in. And whenever my wife came in, she said, we got to do something. There's blood running down her face. I don't know what happened. And she was acting like she was completely blind. So we don't know if she laid down and hit that side of her head. We don't know if she ran into something, turned and whacked it. We don't know if something spooked her and she ran into it. Or we don't know if something tried to get a hold of her and hit her in it. There's no good way of telling. There was no claw marks, no scratches, nothing like that. It was just her eye was ruptured. So she was 100% blind. It was sleeting, snowing. She was freaking out and going crazy and everything else. All the other horses were kind of doing the same thing. We go down there in the sleet and snow, finally get to her close to where our old barn is and my grandmother's house is. And I get her to calm down enough to where I can get close to her, but baby talking her and everything else, where I can put her out of her misery. I'm not going to let her suffer through that by any means. So we do that. I'm going to guess either the fire or something attracted this thing, because I hear something off in the woods. Even through the sleet and snow, I can hear something. And it just feels like something's there. I take the flashlight, I shine it. Sure enough, there's amber eyes about 7 foot up. I would have thought it was cows because of how wide the eye set was, except for it being 7 foot above the ground.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I just kind of look at it and say, you stay on that side of the fence, I'll stay on this side. And obviously it knew I had a at the time because I just a horse. So it stayed over there as far as I could tell. We had to wait until the sleet and snow and everything was over and the ground thawed out enough for me to be able to bury the horse. Nothing got to her, nothing else happened. She got the horse buried. As I was burying the horse, I happened to look to my side towards my creek line, and I could see something dark kind of move. And I stopped and I started looking at it, and you can actually see these things. And this was in the day. The part of the creek that I spotted this in was about 4.5, 5 foot deep. If you're standing in the middle of it, you could just kind of see maybe 1.5 foot of this thing. So it was like it was crouched down and watching me, trying to see what I was doing. Probably not the brightest part on my end, but I get out of the tractor, look at it, blankly make sure that it realizes I see it, and then turn my back to it and get back in the tractor. Kind of one of those things of, yeah, I see you, I don't care. These things, I don't think they cloak. I just think that they are so well naturally camouflaged. If they stay still and somebody does not have a trained eye to spot stuff like that, just kind of the same thing as like with the snakes and everything else. If somebody doesn't know to look for it and doesn't have a trained eye to spot it, they're going to step on it.
Yeah.
And it's the same situation with these things.
I know you said when we talked on the phone the other day that you feel like you have some type of innate ability to spot these things quickly, or, like you're more in tune with their presence somehow.
It's like that. And like I said, I can spot a snake before most anybody else can.
Do you think it's just growing up in the country and spending a lot of time outdoors? And I know you said you're a hunter, so maybe that kind of sharpened the skill or something?
It's a lot of it. And like I'd said before, whenever we were talking about the tree and everything else, and that I would always draw a certain rune it wasn't on the tree, but it was a rune that I drew, and I didn't know what it meant. The key part of it is the key rune in it is tied to the god Uller in Norse mythology. He is the god of the wild hunt, the glorious one, the archer, the hunter. There is not an animal on earth that he could not kill. There's not an animal anywhere that he could not hunt. So drawing that on just about everything I owned whenever I was younger and not knowing what it was just imprinted in my mind. I don't know why. If you want to get onto the mystical side of things or anything like that, maybe I'm tied to that certain god.
There is actually a scientific explanation for what you're experiencing with that, or could be. We never know. We always like to leave it open here on Paranormally Correct for interpretation. But there's a study that I heard about probably a month or so ago where they were talking about genetics. Most people think of just like traits like hair color, eye color, things like that being passed down through the generations. But knowledge and life experiences and stuff like that can actually be passed down through the generations as well. So it could also be that your ancestors, maybe they were involved in something or another, and it just came right on down the line to you. And
it's really possible. My grandmother always said I was born with a gun in my hand.
Yeah, so it could definitely be something like that. Or, you could just have a special knack for being observant and could be anything. But it's definitely significant. And
it's
I think
definitely served me well.
Yeah, definitely coming in handy right now, it sounds like.
Even in my professional life, because I do private security. So
Mm-hmm.
In the military, in the Navy, I opted for all the extra training I could get. And then even whenever I went and got my security license, I opted for all the extra training, including hostile environment, close protection, and a bunch of more advanced training than what most of your security guards have. So most of the jobs I go do, I'm highly overqualified for. But I also did contract work. So it's kind of one of those things. So it served me well on that because, the whole game, spot the sniper before he gets you.
Exactly, yeah.
Served me very well on that. So, and these things do not seem to like that I can spot them or that I can pick them out.
Yeah, they're probably not used to it. They probably, and I'm of the belief that like if Dogman is real and he's out there, he is smart. I definitely think Bigfoot, I think is, probably smarter than us because he sure is sneaky. He's the hide and seek champion of all time. And so these creatures, I think that they're thinking things through. I think that they're, able to kind of weigh situations and stuff. And so, it's entirely possible that they're like, hey, how come all the other people, we could sneak up on them, but this guy here, we're not, we're failing, we're epic failing.
Right.
So I know you mentioned your wife quite a few times. What does she think about all this? Is she what kind of experiences has she had too?
She's cautious of it.
Does she believe in the paranormal and cryptids and things like that?
Yes. Yeah, she does. And obviously she doesn't go walking around after dark or anything like that out here. Typically,
right.
When she does go walking around, she does have her firearm on her. I've trained her every bit that I could and taught her how to do as much as I could. She's honestly probably a better shot than I am.
Well, they say women are usually a better shot than men are. I have no idea why. There's some science behind it, but I think it's a scientific fact.
Tend to be more steady. And, but yeah, she's like I said, she's seen it and everything, and her point of view on it is if it leaves her animals alone, she's going to leave it alone. So, and it's kind of one of those things that, if it was that way, they'd be great. But it's running out of wild pigs. Whenever it runs out of wild pigs, the next thing is going to be the livestock.
Right.
So,
and that's something that we talked about too, about, like a lot of times when people have this type of activity, pets start going missing and, stuff like that. So are you aware of, maybe in like on your property or neighboring properties, have you heard any reports of like animal casualties or
yes.
Has anybody else had an experience or a sighting even?
Talking to some of the researchers, there have been several reportings in my area. And definitely a lot of different stuff going on.
That's pretty interesting. I feel like for me personally, it's good to have that validation that, other people are having similar encounters. Because I know, like, when I had my Bigfoot sighting that time, I was like, all right, that's it. I've lost it. I've gone off the deep end. But then I was able to talk to some researchers and, locals and stuff. And it turns out that Bigfoot had been quite busy that week. So it's always kind of nice to have other people be like, yeah, hey, I'm seeing it too. So
yeah,
you haven't lost your marbles.
Pretty much. So after the whole sleet and snow and everything, I started looking for tracks. I found the first set of tracks. And the actual way that I found it is my wife and I went down to go fill our feeder. And we had taken one of the dogs with us, and he was acting weird about towards the barn and towards the freestanding granary. And so we went down there and we checked it all and was kind of making sure everything was working right. Got the memory card out of the game camera that was down there. And we were walking back up the hill and walked past the barn and the granary. And my wife goes, that door was not shut a while ago. And it was the door to the granary. Okay. So I draw my pistol, me thinking more so along the lines of a vagrant or something like that. It's not entirely impossible for one of them to have found their way out here. I go over there and look, there's nothing in it. And I start looking around inside it, and there is a paw print. And the scary thing about the paw print is it's just as if it was a human footprint, it would have been somebody standing against the wall, looking out the doorway towards the feeder. And it was one print. It was a canine style print, almost 7 inches across. Got a picture of that one. So we ease back up to the house. We grab a little bit better of than just a go back down there. And that's whenever I find the tracks that are underneath the barn loft. Again, the same size, along with the spacing. The spacing is about 26 inches as far as the stride. So find those prints, and we start looking. We had placed some boards over the opening to get up into the hayloft, and that was actually screwed down from the inside is how I'd placed those boards there. Something had pushed them up and over to where it opened up the opening. And so me, not being the intelligent person that I am, climbed up the ladder to go look around. There's nothing up there except for an area where something had made a bed.
Okay, I've got one pulled up. I don't know if you can see it.
Yep, I can see it.
These are the right ones then?
Yep, that was the one that was in the dust in the granary.
Yeah.
And so that's the dirt and dust on there is maybe an inch thick on top of a metal floor.
Mm-hmm.
So the other one, that one there is underneath it's in the loafing area of barn.
Mhm.
That track there is deeper in the sand or in the dirt than what the horse tracks are.
Yeah, these are some strange looking prints. Rebecca, what do you think about these?
I think they are quite interesting. Unlike the ones we looked at the last time, you can't really see the claw marks in the mud, which makes me lean toward,
Mountain lion. This one you can actually see a little bit of the claw mark out there towards the end of them.
well, most creatures don't walk with toe claws.
Nope. At least not mountain lions. Cats don't. Dogs do.
Mm-hmm. Dogs do. They don't have retractable claws.
Yeah, I feel like is this a claw mark right here though? Like, is this, what am I looking at? Like right in this
I think
area?
that's just the shadow.
I think that's just
Okay.
a shadow, yeah.
Okay.
There's 4 toes and then the pad. And like I said, I climb up top, and that's whenever I find the area that was cleaned off, like something had laid down up there, made a bed, and it's bigger than an area that I would have needed to if I was curled up. So it would have had to have been something big.
Yeah.
And it would have had to been something strong to push 3-inch screws out of the boards.
Yeah.
Those pictures are definitely interesting.
After that, I get a different position on work, so I'm leaving out early in the morning. And I'm heading out. One walks right out in front of me, and it's not the one that I shot. It walks out in front of my vehicle about 75 yards in front of me on the driveway, right in an area that is wooded on the driver's side. I'm sitting here thinking this is an ambush. This is exactly how an ambush should go. So as I'm keeping my attention, or at least keeping my head facing the one in front of me, I'm looking to each and every side that I can for movement. I spot movement out my driver's side window. Trying to be as smooth as possible, I draw my pistol. I ease it up underneath my arm that's still on the steering wheel and still have my head facing forward. The car has tinted windows, it's dark, and there's no lights inside for the most part, so it'd be really hard to see inside, at least as far as a human goes. But I'm still keeping my kind of covered underneath the jacket that I'm wearing. As it steps out from behind a tree at about 20 foot from me, I decide to turn the laser light combo on the pistol, just to let it know that I see it. I make sure that I had a general idea that the was pointed at its head. Whenever I turned it on, it just happened to be pointed at its nose. The laser dot was actually on its nose. This thing swats at the laser dot. I actually start kind of chuckling because it swatted at the laser dot. Dogs always go for a laser. Why wouldn't this thing? And then I'm actually able to kind of see that it's missing part of its nose and has a nasty scar going down the side of its snout. So this is the one I shot. It kind of glares at me and huffs, kind of like, damn it, huff. And you just get this feeling that, like, crap, you knew I was here. I didn't surprise you. What the hell? The other one that was in front of me, I can kind of trying to keep eyes on both of them. It was a little difficult, but I was able to do the best I could. It looked like it was bent over laughing. Like almost if they have a sense of humor. I know they have intelligence, but it almost seemed like it had a sense of humor, and it was laughing at the other one. And it just kind of walks back off into the trees. This one stares at me again and takes one step towards me, and then looks like it's thinking about it, and then turns around and leaves. I drive on to work.
That's pretty crazy. That and what you were talking about with the barbed wire across the drive, it's almost like they're trolling you in a way. Like they're
They
kind
have
of
been watching me and trying to learn my patterns.
Mm-hmm.
They have been trying to figure out, okay, my trash dumpster is off towards the wooded area that's up there, and they pretty much know that I take it out every Wednesday. So I have to watch myself very carefully, and I make sure I do it during daylight. Whenever I do, that way I at least can see a decent distance around me. among other things, I generally haul water to my cattle about every other day. I happen to see movement in an abandoned building that's down there on the neighboring property, and watched it, and you could see pointy ears and then some eyes kind of looking out through some slats. 2 days later, whenever I was going to do that, I decided to record as I was driving down there. And sure enough, I happened to catch movement. And I'm rolling through there, but I couldn't get a good, clear view of it. Nope, got movement. Poked its head out. I've noticed that most of the time, wherever these things are, there's always buzzards close by. Always buzzards close by. So I've learned to look for circling buzzards. That just kind of one of those things of, all right, if I see circling buzzards, or if I see buzzards perched up in a tree and not down on the ground eating something, then there's a good chance it's in that area. So, and there was a buzzard that kind of hopped out of the top part of this thing, of the building, through a hole. And I'm easing up, and of course I'm sitting here talking as I'm recording. About the time I say buzzard, I hear a low grumble growl. I'm like, ooh, apparently I woke it up and make it mad. Didn't see anything, didn't get anything thrown on the vehicle or anything else. So I went on, dropped the water, headed back, didn't see anything whenever I came back through. Next morning, Monday, that was this last Sunday. Monday morning, my wife was going outside to check something. Our dog was in there growling out the window. He was sitting in his kennel growling, not wanting her to go outside, not wanting to. She goes out on the porch, she shines the flashlight around. Off down the hill, she sees an amber eye. She's like, oh, and it's a dark animal shape. It looked like it was on all fours. So she's thinking, oh, that's a horse. And she scans the flashlight a little further, and she counts 1, 2, 3, 4 horses, including the horse that she thought that was, because there's only 4 of them out there since we had put that one down. All these horses are staring at this one animal. She turns it back. It's got both eyes pointed at her now and looking at her. She kind of looks at it, shines the light, takes a step towards it, and it walks backwards. It goes backwards a couple of feet, and then right off of a cliff towards a creek line, and not in an easy area to go down either. So she went down it, or it went down it, and disappeared. Later that evening, probably around 6 o'clock, I'm in the kitchen. The horses. Sorry about that.
Hey, if you see like a Dogman right now, turn on the camera and go after it.
No, actually, it's just my wife coming home.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So, but
Sounds like excitement.
Yeah.
yes, obviously, I've got a whole herd of dogs. Anyway, the horses were down by one of my ponds, and it's got a bunch of willow trees around it and everything else. I didn't see them leave the area or anything, but I was in the kitchen doing dishes, something along that line. I happened to look back out the window and I saw what looked like a brown butt or a dark butt, which one of our horses is a bay. So she's dark brown, black. And it looked like it was going off into the trees by the pond. Oh, okay. They're going to the pond, getting a drink, whatever. And I go around to the other side of the house to do something. And I look out the window, and here's all 4 of the horses staring off down at that pond. I'm like, oh, okay then. This was Monday night. We go on. Nothing really happens Monday night. Nothing happens Tuesday morning, as far as we know, even with the storms and everything. I decide to go check the barn and see if there's any tracks Tuesday evening. If there's any new signs, I also need to go reset the game camera that I'd put up in the barn up in the hayloft. I'm walking down there, and I decide, I probably should just go ahead and record as I'm walking through here. And so I'm recording as I'm walking around. And I check the little granary and everything to see if there's any new prints or anything. There was nothing that you could be definite about. As I'm walking in underneath the barn, under the little covered area where I found the prints before, I'm kind of looking around and I spot one. And there's a stench in the air. The same smell that I've kind of noticed whenever these things are around. Like, oh, okay, so it must have been here recently. Maybe it was here over the night or something like that. And I see that print. I've got my pistol drawn and my rifle's on the sling because I'm recording. So I set my pistol down next to it. Well, this is a full-size pistol. This is not a little one. This is a full-size combat pistol. This print's just about as big as this. It's easily 7 to 8 inches. I ease on around. There's even a couple of partial prints that are going through there. And this print looks like it was moving fast. It didn't look like it was a slow walk. It looked like it was moving fast. So I ease on around. I'm looking, and I'm looking at the ladder going up, and I start to go underneath the opening, and I stop. I happen to notice that there's a wet spot on the wall that looks like something wet dropped on it. And it looks thick. It definitely looks like something drooled on it, and it's still wet. And about the time I'm filming that, and you can't see that on the camera, but some of the dust fell from above my head. So I kind of ease back and I start looking up, and you can see that the 2x6 joist and the floorboards are bowed down like something very heavy is right there behind the opening. Just where if you were coming up the ladder, it would be right behind you.
Let's pull that video up real quick, actually, and take a look at it.
Yes, I'd like to see this.
All right, just a second. And you did send me 2 of those, right? There's a part 1 and part 2?
Yep.
Okay.
If that was a mountain lion, that was a gigantic mountain lion.
Yeah, that ain't no mountain lion.
No.
Okay, let's pull up part 2. That kind of gives me chills.
Yeah, that's kind of insane. Jeff asks, is there something of value that's in there that the creature finds, or it's just a shelter storage building?
Yep, it's empty up top.
Alrighty, so just a hiding space.
All right. Well, thank you again for coming on.
Thanks, Sean.
Thank you.
Look forward to seeing you back.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
So what do you guys think? I mean, everybody in the comments, like, any thoughts on this story? This is one of the most impressive Dogman encounter stories I think I've heard.
Yeah.
Because, you know, I don't know, it just seems so realistic. Like, a lot of times I hear Dogman stories and I'm like, that sounds a little suspicious, you know. But this one really hit me, especially, you know, with his paranormal experiences too.
Mm-hmm.
Really impressive story, I think. Sounds like there's a spiritual connection to the land. I know, that's like, I kind of felt like that too. It kind of feels like this is all connected somehow in a weird way, but, you know, who knows? It may not be. It may be just, I do think though that some people are just paranormal experiencers from the get-go. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
because there's a lot of people out there who just never have experiences, and then there are other people who have tons of experiences. Like, I used to investigate with this guy. He was actually a co-founder of my first paranormal team, and he was a full-on believer, total skeptic, but he'd never had a single experience. Like, how is that possible? Why do you believe in ghosts and stuff if you've never had an experience? I don't remember what he told me, but he had some kind of strange answer for it. Yeah, we can be magnets.
Well,
yeah.
If you take a look at all of the paranormal stuff that was happening that he was describing, everything to me points to nature spirits and the Fae. And in Fae lore, you have changelings that can switch forms. So who's to say one can't make itself look like a Dogman?
Exactly. Yeah.
I don't know. Just something to think about.
And I thought it was interesting how he, you know, seems to have some type of, I think there's a phrase for it, some type of memory. of those runes or like some type of connection to them. Maybe that Dogman presence or cryptid presence in general has been on that property for a long time. And maybe the people, because he said his family had owned that property for like, 150 years or something like that.
And
so
they came from Ireland.
Yeah. And so maybe they knew all along that there was some type of cryptid activity.
That is quite possible.
We actually have Cryptid coming on soon, and I'm really excited for that one because if you guys don't know, I don't know if Cryptid's still here in the chat. Cryptid has a lot to talk about, I believe. And they also have a channel that you should definitely go check out. And lots of, Dogman related footage and stuff like that, cryptid footage. Investigative footage, I should say. I'm really looking forward to, hopping on a stream together and talking about their experiences.
But if anybody ever wants to send either of us any kind of paranormal stories, evidence, photos, videos, whatever, Sarah's email is paranormallycorrect@hotmail.com. And mine is ParanormallyBecca@gmail.com. And that's BECCA.
Yeah, so feel free to reach out to us. Free paranormal analysis, pictures and videos. I'm not so great with sound. Sound is not my area, unfortunately. All right, guys. Well, I guess we'll wrap it up for tonight. Hopefully you all enjoyed the stream. Do not forget to click the like button and especially the subscribe button. That's the most important of all the buttons. Turn on post notifications so that you never miss another epic stream like this one. We've got lots of Dogman guests coming up soon. And like I said, if any of you out there want to come on and tell your paranormal story, whether it's Dogman or not, feel free to shoot either one of us an email and let us know. We'll be looking forward to hearing from you. And we have a Discord too.
Yeah.
We haven't been plugging that probably as much as we should. If you guys use Discord, there's a link in the description. You can check that out. You can come over and talk paranormal stuff with us. Follow the Facebook page, Instagram. I have a TikTok, but I mean, it's kind of going the way of the dodo right now. But all right, guys, well, we are going to head out for the night. Until next time, don't get eaten by Dogman.
And certainly don't get abducted by aliens.
And we'll talk to you guys later.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.